Welcome back to Sunrise Daily World. We're turning our attention now to local content matters. We just spoke about developments in Ghana, how we needed to pay attention to some other things, our blind spot, as the analysts described it. Well, now we've got Mr. Simbi Wabote, who is the Executive Secretary, Nigerian Content Development and Monitoring Board. He's an engineer. Good morning, and thank you for joining us today. Well, okay, there's some good...
Morning, Chamberlain. Thanks for having me.
Okay, thank you. I'm just, yes, recently, that 17-story building, what a statement it was, really, for that structure to be right there. So it gives us a lot of hope that certain things can indeed happen. Because, I mean, before local content was even talked about, who would have thought that can be achieved when it was. So beyond just seeing that building, could you give us a picture? What kind of progress are we making concerning local content, particularly in that sector?
Yeah, thanks once again, Chamberlain, and thanks for having me. And thank you for all the congratulatory messages with regards to the commissioning of the 17-story building in Bayelsa State, in Yanagua to be precise. We're very happy for that achievement. In the sector currently, like you know, the local content law itself that we have focuses on the oil and gas sector. In that sector, we have made significant progress from when we started in 2010. Just as an example, before the Local Content Act came into being, in 2010, usually the oil and gas sector spent about $21 billion year on year on all oil and gas activities. And only about less than 5% of that was domiciled in country. Everything that was done in that sector was taken out of this country. But today, we're very happy to tell you that we're about 32% in terms of what we've been able to claw back within the short period of 10 years. You probably think 10 years is a very long time, particularly when you look at the oil and gas business, which is highly technology intensive and equipment intensive. And to make that progress within that period, I think is quite significant. We've been able to establish a lot of fabrication yards in the country. Before 2010, we were only doing less than 2,000 metric ton fabrication in the country. But as I speak to you, we're doing 60,000 metric ton fabrication in the country in the oil and gas sector. We were also able to break a record in terms of integrating the first world largest FPSO, 2,000 barrels per day production of Total in Nigeria. Today, Nigerians are running the business in the oil and gas sector. Look at most of the companies, the MDs are Nigerians. These are things you've never heard of. I joined the oil and gas industry in 1991. And as a young engineer, we were told where we could get up to in that organization, which of course ended at the supervisory level as opposed to becoming a manager or a director. But I left Shell in 2016 as a director of that company. And today you have a Nigerian as the MD. Look at your NLNG today. 95% of the employees in that organization are Nigerians. And today is one of the best run oil and gas facility in the country. So we've come a long way. We've achieved quite a lot to the extent that you begin to have countries, neighboring African countries, asking to learn how we've been able to achieve this milestone. I recall as a young man, even in the helicopter business, which is safety critical, was the exclusive preserve of the likes of Bristol helicopters and the rest. Today you have Cavatin, you have other Nigerian providers who are even extending their services beyond the shores of Nigeria. When you look at the subsurface studies, In those days, all studies, subsurface studies, in terms of our data, our reserves, everything was outside this country. But today, most Nigerians have set up facility to undertake subsurface engineering studies, and all the well servicing opportunities in the oil and gas industry are managed by Nigerians. So by every standard, we have indeed achieved a lot in moving the needle when it comes to local content in the oil and gas sector. And like you said, the 17-story building is a statement saying that what we have done in that sector, we've been able to do it as NCDMB in terms of building our head office. That head office was built by an indigenous contractor. Almost 75% of the materials we use are from Nigeria. 95% of the workforce that built that building were Nigerians. As a matter of fact, when we started, we made it very clear to the contractor that all the workers you are going to use on this project must be from Nigeria, including the tilers, the masons, the carpenters. It was a challenge for the contractor, but that's what the law says. And the contractor had to take about 250 youths in collaboration with ITF, train them on these skills. And those were the people that indeed built that building. And we are very proud of the achievement. And like I said during the commissioning by our dear president, it gives hope when people look at that building being the tallest in the south-south and in the southeast as we speak. So it gives hope to a lot of people that a lot can be done in this country. Chamberlain.
Already people are poking me, asking me, well, look, we hope that they can see a similar scenario with the rail sector, but I told you, you're not the minister in that regard. But when you speak about how huge the kind of impact the local participation, immediately it comes to head is, I mean, you're an engineer yourself. Are institutions here? Is there a relationship with them? Because this is a huge opportunity for them to leverage on and build capacity as well. What's going on in that regard?
If I get your question correctly, if you are talking about our institutions, perhaps tertiary institutions and the impact, I don't know if that's the direction that you're going. But I must tell you that with the statistics that I gave you, most of us are products of our institutions. If I got your question correctly, majority of us never schooled outside this country, at least for our first degrees. So the institutions have been able to bring up quality graduates as well as quality engineers, ICT sector and the rest of it all. The only challenge that most of the youth have when they come out of those institutions are the opportunities. The opportunities, well, I manage the oil and gas sector. Like you know, it's not a great employer of people because of the machineries and because of the technology involved. But the supply chain that it creates has the potential to increase that by sixfold. For every one job you create directly in the oil and gas sector, you create about 6 of that in the supply chain that it creates. If you look at it, majority of the people managing those organizations today were products of Nigerian institutions. But the challenge is, like I said, when those graduates come out, anywhere you go, people ask for experience. We needed to create a situation where opportunity is provided the young graduates in terms of internship so that they can acquire the desired experience to be able to get employed as at when the time comes. But that challenge is a bit there. The nexus between industry and the academia, I think it's not well defined, and there is no proper handshake between those institutions and the industry. But if we are able to put a formidable strategy around that, where I recall in those days when I was in the university, The industrial work experience was one of the key things that drove that experience that is desired when you come out of the university, because you also capture that as part of your training program. Some of us spent 1 year, 6 months in the industry to understand how it works before we graduated, and that gave us an edge to a large extent. But today, I don't know how formidable that industrial work experience is within our universities and also with the industry, Chamberlain.
Well, definitely the local content policy hasn't come without its challenges, the initiatives of government and of course your office. Some will also point to the fact that some of the objectives include increase in oil and gas reserves and so many other things, increase production capacity. But perhaps the most important of these objectives would be what some would call the integration of the oil and gas industry into the mainstream economy through local refineries and petrochemicals. That's definitely a major gap, which most certainly would create a lot of jobs for people if we could bring that into mainstream economy. So this question seems like a two-pronged one. On the one hand, what are those challenges that the local content policy is confronting, and how do we integrate that the successes you have reeled out now into mainstream?
Yeah, indeed. Well, it's not a policy, it's a local content law, as it were, in the oil and gas sector. It metamorphosed from policy to an act. It comes with a lot of challenges. Like I said, because the sector is highly technological intensive. Therefore, developing local content is not a flicker of the switch. It takes time in that sector. Like I always say in every forum that I find myself, is that local content is not a sprint. It is a marathon. You have to build it over time. Of course, there will be a lot of resistance from the international operators, including the local operators, because every businessman wants to maximize his profit. And for them, introducing local content that at the beginning will cost them a bit, but towards the end, they see the benefit because it does reduce cost. They will resist it because they want to maximize that. So we got a lot of resistance from the international oil companies as well as the local companies. That was a big challenge. The other challenge we are faced with was the dearth of infrastructure in our country, which of course increases cost of activities within the oil and gas sector. For instance, you have today a flourishing pipe mill factory in Abuja. And if you want to use those pipes in the south, where the oil and gas activities operate, you have to move those pipes from Abuja to a place like Port Harcourt. Under normal circumstance, if the roads were very good, it would take you perhaps 8 hours to get that truck to Port Harcourt. But today, with some of the challenges we face with the infrastructure, it will take you probably 3 days. And that, of course, increases cost. The other bit is about the energy. You need a lot of power in that sector to be able to do your fabrication and other activities. Of course, because of the challenges we face with the power sector, that in itself has a cost that it adds to it, because every contractor has to install a generator, use diesel, and that adds to the cost. So infrastructure challenge is there. And also capacity challenge also do exist in the sense that because of the lack of capacity in taking over some of the operations in the oil and gas sector, we had to see a delayed process, because you cannot just replace an expert with a Nigerian who has not gained up the experience and who have not been trained for certain types of jobs. So there was also capacity constraint as a challenge, which of course we had to face. And bit by bit, we had to deal with those challenges and integrate that into our process. Coming back to the second part of your question, in terms of the value chain within the oil and gas sector, going back to refining and scooping the benefit of the oil and gas value chain from the upstream to the downstream sector. I think that has been very much a challenge for Nigerians. Most of the refineries that you expect that should work had their challenges before now. They are not working. But I think there is hope in that regard. I think the other day I heard the GMD during a presentation reel out the plans to revamp most of those refineries. Some of these things take time. And we in NCDMB have also collaborated with investors to catalyze the process of refining in our country. We've taken equity position in some of those modular refineries that are being built in the country. As I speak to you, our partnership with Walter Smith Refinery, production was supposed to start on the 1st of May, but unfortunately we got caught up with the COVID challenge. But I can assure you that by mid-September, production in that refinery will start. We have also taken a position in Azike Refinery in Bayelsa State. We believe that it's a hydroskimming refinery, which is a bit different from a topping plant. We believe that by fourth quarter 2022, that will also come on stream, and also with DuPont in Edo State. So there are lots of these modular refineries that we have actually invested in. And like you know, the Dangote refinery is also accelerating its completion process. It's a 650,000 barrels per day production. Yes, you might say we woke up late to take up those challenges from the private sector, but I think we are making tremendous progress under this administration. The Minister of State for Petroleum Resources, whom I report to directly, is something that he holds discussions about every week. There is no week that passes that I am not called to ask for progress we are making in that area in order for Nigeria to be self-sufficient in terms of refining capacity. And I can assure you, Chamberlain, that between now and 2022, I think the narrative will change in terms of how we've been able to claw back benefits from the oil and gas value chain. And we're working towards that, I can assure you.
All right, well, talking about the possibility of applying that law, the local content law, to other sectors, I don't know if you see this as a challenge. Some of the things that some revelations coming out now from loans we are getting and some contracts or terms or agreements we are signing indicates that the giver, the person who is giving us the money to do our own projects, includes certain clauses that says that they have to take certain positions, execute certain things. Now, talking about the capacity development that you talked about the other time, that you mentioned earlier, how do you think that helps or hurts the knowledge transfer or capacity development initiative that this local content law seeks to build?
Well, I think there's no, it's a no-brainer when you say he who pays the piper dictates the tune. Most of these countries that grant you some bit of loan to undertake certain activities, of course, there's no free lunch. It will come with some level of conditions, as it were, especially if it is a challenge for you to generate such monies to take care of your infrastructure. But I think the beauty of it all is that the borrowing is not being done for people to use it on activities or projects that will not be visible to the eyes. And I think for me, this borrowing is being done to develop infrastructure in the country. Of course, no doubt that when they give you the loans, they will put some conditions, including some level of supply, including bringing in their personnel to work. It's all over the world it happens. Even if China gives loan to America, they will demand the same conditions. So Nigeria is not any different. But again, like I said, because local content is not a sprint, it is a marathon. Some of this infrastructure that we never heard before in this country Probably we did have, but some of us never saw it work efficiently, and we want to bring such infrastructure back to our country. Of course, we need all the help on earth. And like I say to people, I said, look, if there is a technology that Nigerians don't have capacity for, and you have an expert firm that has that technology and that capacity, and they want to come to Nigeria in order to install that capacity under the policy of domiciliation and domestication that we drive in the oil and gas sector. Of course, for us, we will support such an establishment, but on one condition, that you must give us a plan with which you will domesticate all those positions over a specific period of time. That's our strategy. But if you say no, you want Nigerians to be the ones to take total responsibility for this from day one, of course it's not going to work, because the technology belongs to them. Therefore, we just develop a strategy of domiciliation. First, domicile that activity in country. Whether you like it or not, that activity has the potential to support other ancillary activities. For instance, if you bring people into the country to establish a factory, they are going to require drivers, they are going to require cooks, they are going to require cleaners, they are going to require rent houses and the rest of it. So it supports the other invisible economy, as it were. But with our strategy, over a period of 5 years, you must give us a plan where you want to build Nigerian capacity to take over those responsibilities. And that's what we have done in the oil and gas industry. That's why today you see most of the Nigerian operated assets are producing much more than when it was handled by international oil companies.
Let me jump in and ask you this.
When Seplat...
Well, I'd like you to just bring that example as well, because we understand that from what you've said actually previously, over 30,000 direct jobs have been created as a result of implementing this particular act. Now, we've also read and seen that you've had several meetings with different members of the National Assembly, how we need to replicate this same success story on the other sectors of the economy. Now, could you talk to us about that, particularly concerning funding? Because without that funding component being addressed, I'm not sure that you would have gotten this far, because yes, it's funded by, I think, a Nigerian Content Fund. So how do you, or what kind of conversation and what kind of progress is being made to ensure that we get the same thing in other sectors?
I think my personal opinion on this matter is that there are sectors that are cost centers, and there are sectors that also generate income. What I mean by that is that there are certain sectors that you just keep spending money, but there are certain sectors that as you spend money, it brings money back to you, like the oil and gas sector. If we invest, we get return on investment, because that is the mainstay of our economy. So if you look at other sectors, don't want to single them out here, there are some of them that have the potential to generate money if you put in money into them. For me, those are the sectors that we need to focus on in terms of extending local content. And it has to be a gradual approach. You cannot flicker the switch on local content development overnight. So my approach will be, look at those sectors that if you put in money, it will generate money for a start of extending local content. As an example, the mining sector. There is no gainsaying the mining sector has a huge potential. If you invest money, you're going to get money back. Even in your rail sector, you invest money, you're going to get money back. Because by the time you begin to operate your railway lines and the rest of it, the income you generate has potential to sustain your drive for local content in those sectors. So my approach will be, look at those sectors that have that potential, focus on them, and ensure that you put the same strict processes and procedures that you have put in the oil and gas sector. Probably because of the nature of our training. The oil and gas sector is a very delicate sector where you do not want to play with safety. Hence, what the law said is that you cannot do oil and gas activities if you don't meet the minimum standard. If you take the same position with other sectors that also generate revenue, you can potentially accumulate some fund in order to support those sectors. But if you just say it's a carte blanche and you want to do it in every other sector, just like you said, Chamberlain, you're not going to have so much progress because funding is a key enabler for the development of local content. And how do you get that funding? If you focus on sectors that don't generate that kind of revenue, all you do, you continue to bleed government income in those directions. So we need to take it one step at a time, as opposed to thinking it's a carte blanche, you want to run every sector the same way the oil and gas sector has been run. And then secondly, Chamberlain, we have a great opportunity here in those sectors that I've talked about. The COVID-19 itself has brought a lot of things to fall with regards to the challenges we face. Look at the oil and gas sector. Despite the COVID-19, we were still operating and we were still producing at full capacity because we've been able to get Nigerians to take on those positions as contractors, as staff. So we didn't feel any panic in the sector. But so many other sectors suffered because all the expats, most of them left, they were evacuated. But in the oil and gas sector, those who were evacuated had to go to their country, but that did not close the tap. We still continue to produce in the country because of our if you like, continuous effort to build capacity in that sector. I was giving you an example of Seplat. Seplat today is run by almost 98% Nigerians. When they took over that facility from Shell, which I was involved in when I was in Shell to sell that facility to them, it was producing about 19,000 barrels per day. But today, Seplat is doing about 75,000 barrels per day production and aiming for 100. This is managed by Nigerians because of what we have done over time.
All right. Well, that's very good to hear indeed. And we do hope that we can see this in other sectors of the economy, just as you highlighted. Nigerians can do these things as they have demonstrated. So we do thank you for your time. Simbi Wabote, Executive Secretary, Nigeria Content Development and Monitoring Board. Thank you and all the best.
Thank you very much, Chamberlain. Thank you.
All right. We're back in a moment. Don't go away.